Hello, I will be telling you a series of short stories to either help you fall asleep or for you to enjoy late at night. The Last Call. The rain came down in thick sheets, drumming against the windshield of Sam's cab. It was a miserable night, the kind where the city seemed to weep with its inhabitants. Sam, a grizzled taxi driver who had seen it all, stared out at the empty streets, contemplating calling it a night. Just as he reached for the radio to sign off, his dispatch crackled. "Got a fare, Sam. Last call of the night." "Send it through," he grumbled. The address led him to the outskirts of town, near the old street Harlow's Church. The place had been abandoned for years, its looming steeple barely visible through the downpour. As Sam pulled up, he saw her standing in the shadows, a woman in a tattered, blood-soaked wedding dress. She stumbled toward the cab, her veil hanging in shreds, her face pale as the moon. Sam hesitated but unlocked the door. "Where to?" he asked, his voice steady despite the unease crawling up his spine. "Anywhere but here," she whispered, her voice trembling. The drive was silent at first, the only sound the rhythmic swish of the windshield wipers. Sam couldn't help but glance at her through the rearview mirror. Her eyes were hollow, sunken deep into her face, and her hands trembled in her lap. "You all right back there?" he finally asked. She nodded but didn't speak. Then, out of nowhere, she whispered, "Do you believe in second chances?" Sam frowned. "I guess." "Why?" Her lips curled into a sad smile. "I didn't." As they passed under a streetlight, Sam noticed something odd. Her reflection in the mirror flickered, almost like static on a TV screen. He blinked, and it was gone. "You been in an accident or something?" he asked, gesturing to the blood on her dress. Her gaze shifted to meet his in the mirror, her eyes glistening with tears. "I was running away from him." Sam's grip on the wheel tightened. He didn't ask who him was. He didn't want to know. The ride grew colder, the air inside the cab feeling more like a freezer than a car. Sam glanced at the clock on the dashboard. It was frozen at 12:03, though he was sure it had been working earlier. "You all right?" he asked again, his voice more urgent this time. She smiled, her teeth unnervingly white against her pale skin. "I will be. Soon." Sam pulled into a dimly lit diner parking lot. "Here's as far as I go," he said, eager to get her out of his cab. She leaned forward, her face inches from his. The scent of decay wafted into his nostrils, making him gag. "Thank you, Sam," she said softly. "How do you know my—" he began, but she was gone. The back seat was empty, save for a pool of blood that hadn't been there a moment ago. Panicking, Sam jumped out of the cab and rushed into the diner. The waitress behind the counter raised an eyebrow at him. "You okay, mister?" There was a woman, in a wedding dress. She just. The waitress's face paled. "You're kidding, right?" "What?" That's the ghost of Evelyn Harper," she stammered. "She disappeared on her wedding night, 20 years ago. Folks say she tries to hitch rides to escape her killer, but no one's ever made it past the diner with her." Sam felt the blood drain from his face. He bolted back to his cab, desperate to get away, but the blood in the back seat had spread, soaking through the upholstery. The stench was unbearable. And then he heard it. A faint whisper from the back seat, "You didn't take me far enough, Sam." Before he could react, the doors locked, and the engine roared to life. The cab lurched forward, speeding down the deserted road as if possessed. Sam screamed, but no one heard him. The cab vanished into the night, leaving only the sound of rain and the faint echo of a woman's laughter. The forgotten tenant. The brownstone was everything Rachel and Mark had hoped for, spacious, affordable, and full of charm. Mr. Grayson, their landlord, had been overly eager to sign them as tenants. His only warning was a peculiar one. "Stay away from the basement. It's sealed for a reason." At first, the couple didn't give it much thought. But it was hard to ignore the strange occurrences that started a few days after they moved in. There was an unshakable chill in the apartment, and every night around 3 a.m., faint knocks echoed from somewhere below. "It's just old pipes," Mark said, trying to dismiss it. But Rachel wasn't so sure. The knocks had a rhythm, like someone trying to send a message. One evening, while doing laundry, Mark stumbled across the basement door. It was tucked behind a stack of dusty boxes, chained and padlocked with layers of grime coating the locks. Why would anyone go to this much trouble? Rachel asked, staring at it. Maybe it's just storage, Mark offered, though even he sounded uncertain. That night, the knocking grew louder. "I can't sleep like this," Rachel said, sitting upright in bed. "Fine," Mark relented. "We'll check it out tomorrow. Just to put your mind at ease." The next evening, armed with bolt cutters and a flashlight, they broke the locks. The door creaked open, revealing a staircase descending into darkness. The air smelled damp and metallic, with an undercurrent of decay. "Let's make this quick," Mark said as they stepped inside. The basement was small, its walls streaked with dark stains. In the center was an old wooden cot with rusted chains bolted to its frame. "What is this?" Rachel whispered, dread creeping into her voice. Mark crouched to examine the chains. "These look used." Before they could process what they were seeing, the door slammed shut behind them. The flashlight flickered, and the faint sound of breathing filled the room. "Who's there?" Mark called, his voice trembling. A figure emerged from the shadows, a gaunt woman with hollow eyes and a twisted grin. She moved closer, dragging the chains behind her. "You've finally come back," she rasped, her voice raw. Rachel screamed as Mark pulled her toward the door. They pushed, pulled, and slammed their bodies against it, but it wouldn't budge. "Run!" Mark shouted as the woman lunged. Rachel scrambled up the stairs, only to freeze in horror as she saw Mr. Grayson standing at the top, a smile curling across his face. "You met her, then?" he said casually. "What is this?" "Help us!" Rachel cried. "Help you?" Grayson chuckled. "Oh, no. She's your problem now. That's how it works, you let her out, you take her place." "What?" Rachel's voice broke, and her legs threatened to give out. Grayson leaned in, his smile widening. "The apartment's cursed. The tenant before you. They locked her down there to keep her quiet. But someone always gets curious. Someone always opens the door." Rachel looked back to see Mark, still fighting off the woman as her chains wrapped around his throat. "No!" Rachel screamed, but Grayson grabbed her arm and dragged her upstairs. "Best not look," he said, slamming the basement door shut. Mark's screams echoed once, then stopped. For weeks, Rachel tried to escape. Every time she made it to the front door, she found herself back in the apartment, as if the building itself wouldn't let her leave. And every night, at 3 a.m., the knocking began again, from behind the locked basement door. But this time, it was Mark. Whispering Forest. The Pinehaven Forest was beautiful during the day, its tall trees swaying gently in the breeze, sunlight dappling the forest floor. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, a stillness took hold that was unnerving, as if the forest were holding its breath. 3 friends, Emma, Liam, and Sophie, had set out for a weekend hike, determined to explore the untouched trails. Their guidebook mentioned local legends, including eerie tales of whispers in the forest, but they dismissed them as superstitions. By the second night, their laughter and adventurous spirit had waned. The deeper they ventured, the more oppressive the forest felt. As they gathered around their campfire, Emma froze. "Did you hear that?" Liam cocked his head. "Hear what?" "Shoo," Sophie whispered. They sat in silence, straining their ears. Faintly, almost imperceptibly, a voice called Emma's name. "Emma, come here." It was her mother's voice. But her mother was hundreds of miles away, safely at home. "Mom," Emma whispered, standing. Liam grabbed her arm. "Wait. That's impossible." The voice came again, more insistent. "Emma, I need you." Sophie's face paled. "I heard something too. It's my dad." "No way," Liam said, shaking his head. "You're both hearing things." Then they heard it. "Liam, help me," it was his sister's voice. She lived 3 states away. Their breaths quickened. The whispers grew louder, overlapping in a cacophony of familiar voices, pleading, crying, commanding. "We need to leave," Liam said, yanking on his backpack. "Not yet," Emma said, her eyes glassy. "What if they're in trouble? What if they need us?" "No," Sophie snapped, gripping her arm. "It's not them." But Emma broke free, stumbling into the darkness. "Emma!" Liam shouted, running after her. The forest seemed to come alive, branches snagging their clothes, roots tangling their feet. The whispers swirled around them, louder, more desperate. They found Emma standing in a clearing, staring up at a gnarled, ancient tree. Its bark was blackened, its limbs twisted like claws. At its base, Emma's mother knelt, her face pale and streaked with tears. "Mom." Emma's voice cracked. Her mother looked up, her eyes hollow and lifeless. "Help me, Emma. Please." Sophie screamed as her own father emerged from behind the tree, his head tilted unnaturally to one side. "Sophie, come closer." Liam's sister appeared next, her face smeared with dirt, her voice trembling. "Liam, why won't you help me?" "They're not real." Liam shouted. "Don't go near them." But Emma was already moving, her hand outstretched. The ground shifted. Black roots slithered up from the soil, wrapping around Emma's ankles and dragging her down. Her screams filled the air as the roots pulled her into the earth. Liam and Sophie backed away, trembling, as the voices turned guttural, angry. The figures of their loved ones dissolved into shadows, their forms merging with the tree. "What is this place?" Sophie whispered, tears streaming down her face. "It's a trap," Liam said, grabbing her hand. "We have to go." They ran blindly, the whispers chasing them, their loved ones' voices turning into monstrous growls. When they finally broke through the edge of the forest, the whispers stopped. They collapsed on the ground, gasping for air. Liam looked back at the tree line. It was still and silent, the twisted branches swaying gently. But Sophie wasn't looking at the forest. Her eyes were fixed on Liam. "Your voice," she whispered. "I just heard your voice, calling my name." Liam's blood ran cold as Sophie's face twisted in terror. Before he could respond, the forest pulled her back in. And Liam was left alone, with the whispers starting again, this time in his own voice. Haunted reflection ***. Melody beamed as she placed the antique mirror against her bedroom wall. Its intricate, gilded frame gleamed in the soft light, its surface reflecting her excitement. She had found it at a flea market, an unexpected treasure amid dusty trinkets. "It's perfect," she said aloud, stepping back to admire it. That night, as she got ready for bed, Melody noticed something strange. The reflection seemed darker, as though the mirror absorbed more light than it reflected. Dismissing it as a trick of her tired eyes, she climbed into bed. The first night, it started subtly. As she brushed her hair before the mirror, she saw a faint flicker of movement in the corner of her eye. She turned, but her room was empty. By the second night, the unease grew. While sitting at her desk, Melody glanced at the mirror and froze. Her reflection wasn't matching her movements. She tilted her head, and the image tilted the other way. Her hand trembled as she reached toward the glass, but her reflection didn't move. Instead, it smiled, a slow, unnatural grin that spread wider than any human mouth should. Melody yanked a sheet from her bed and threw it over the mirror. She couldn't bear to look at it anymore. That night, she woke to the sound of faint whispers. Melody. Her heart pounded as she turned on the bedside lamp. The sheet was still in place, but the whispers grew louder, her name repeated in a voice that wasn't hers. She pressed her hands over her ears, rocking back and forth until the whispers faded with the first light of dawn. By the third night, exhaustion clouded her judgment. She decided to sleep with the mirror uncovered, reasoning that it was all in her head. As she turned off the lights, she dared one last glance at the glass. Her reflection stood still while she climbed into bed, watching her with cold, empty eyes. The whispers returned, louder this time. Come closer. She couldn't move, paralyzed by fear. The reflection stepped forward, pressing its hands against the inside of the glass. Let me out, Melody, it hissed, its voice echoing in her skull. Melody screamed and bolted upright, but the room was empty. The mirror stood silent and still, the reflection exactly where it should be. Morning brought no comfort. As she rubbed sleep from her eyes, she noticed something horrifying, the mirror was empty. Her reflection was gone. Panic surged through her as she called out to her roommate, but the apartment was eerily quiet. The day passed in a haze of dread, every shadow in the corners of her vision threatening to come alive. When her roommate finally came home that evening, they found the apartment unnervingly still. Melody's bedroom door was ajar, and the sight inside froze them in place. The mirror stood uncovered, but it wasn't empty anymore. Melody was trapped within the glass, her face frozen in a silent scream, hands pressed against the inside as if trying to claw her way out. Her roommate backed away, but not before noticing something chilling. In the reflection of the room behind them, a new figure stood, a shadowy version of Melody, grinning wickedly. Your turn, the reflection whispered as the mirror's surface rippled, pulling the door shut with a deafening slam. No signal asterisk. The storm was relentless, a cacophony of thunder and rain drowning out every other sound. Emma's car had sputtered and died miles from anywhere, leaving her stranded on a desolate stretch of road. With no choice but to seek shelter, she stumbled upon an old, abandoned gas station. Its windows were cracked, the neon sign long extinguished. The door creaked on rusted hinges as she pushed it open. Inside, the air was damp and stale, shelves half empty and coated with dust. She fumbled for her phone, hoping to call for help, but the screen flashed, no signal. Great, she muttered, sliding it into her pocket. Lightning illuminated the room in brief flashes as she tried to make herself comfortable. The wind howled outside, shaking the building. Then, her phone buzzed. She pulled it out, puzzled. Unknown number. The message read. Stay quiet. They can hear you. Asterisk. Emma froze. She looked around the room, heart pounding. The message had to be a prank, right? But as she turned toward the shattered front window, her breath caught. Through the rain, shadowy figures moved just beyond the light of the flickering street lamp. They were tall, unnaturally so, with elongated limbs and heads that tilted in impossible angles. Her phone buzzed again. Don't let them see you. Asterisk. Emma dropped to the floor, crawling toward the back of the store. The figures outside stopped. One turned its head slowly toward the window, sniffing the air like a predator catching a scent. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it vibrated so loudly she nearly cried out. She fumbled to silence it but froze as another text appeared. They know you're here. Asterisk. Her heart raced as the figures advanced, their movements jerky and inhuman. One pressed its long fingers against the glass, leaving streaks of black ooze as it dragged its hand downward. The door rattled. Emma bit her lip to keep from screaming. She ducked behind the counter, praying they would leave. But the rattling turned into pounding, the thin door creaking under the strain. Her phone vibrated once more. She didn't want to look but couldn't resist. Run. Now. Asterisk. Without thinking, Emma bolted for the back exit. The pounding stopped abruptly, replaced by the sound of shattering glass. She glanced over her shoulder and screamed. The figures were inside, their eyeless faces turned toward her. One reached out, its fingers stretching unnaturally long, nearly grazing her arm. She burst through the back door, slipping on the wet asphalt as she ran into the woods. The rain made it impossible to see, and the pounding of her heart drowned out all other sounds. She stumbled, landing hard in the mud. Her phone buzzed again. She looked at the screen, hands trembling. Too late. Asterisk. The figures emerged from the trees, surrounding her. She screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the storm. The next morning, a passing motorist found her car, empty and locked. The gas station was abandoned, as it had been for years. On the counter inside, her phone sat, its screen cracked and smeared with mud. The final message glowed faintly. Now we wait for the next one. Asterisk. Lost doll. The day Clara found the doll was gray and overcast, the kind of day where shadows linger longer than they should. She was digging in the backyard, searching for worms to put in her bug jar, when her spade hit something hard. Curious, she dug deeper, unearthing a porcelain doll wrapped in tattered cloth. Its face was cracked, one glass eye missing, the other staring vacantly ahead. Its dress was dirty, moth-eaten, but still held a faint elegance. Creepy, Clara muttered, brushing dirt off its face. But something about the doll intrigued her, so she carried it inside. That night, as Clara prepared for bed, she set the doll on her bookshelf. It seemed to fit perfectly there, its single eye gleaming in the dim light. The next morning, Clara froze when she saw the doll. It was no longer on the shelf. Instead, it sat on her desk, its cracked face turned toward her bed. "Mom! Did you move my doll?" she called, her voice shaking. Her mother peeked into the room, frowning. "What doll?" "The one I found yesterday," Clara said, pointing to the desk. Her mom gave her a puzzled look. "I haven't touched it, honey. Maybe you moved it and forgot." Clara didn't reply, but unease settled in her stomach. She picked up the doll and put it back on the shelf, making sure it was wedged between two books so it couldn't fall. That night, Clara awoke to a soft thud. She turned on her bedside lamp and gasped. The doll was on the floor, lying on its back, its one eye staring up at her. Her breath quickened as she reached down and shoved the doll into her closet, slamming the door shut. But the next morning, the closet door was ajar, and the doll was on her bedside table, closer than ever before. Its cracked lips seemed to curl into a faint smile. Over the next few days, the doll kept moving, always closer to her bed. No matter where Clara hid it, in the attic, the basement, even outside, the doll would return, closer than before. One night, Clara decided she'd had enough. She grabbed the doll, stormed into the backyard, and dug a deep hole under the oak tree. She buried the doll and stomped back inside, locking every door and window. That night, Clara slept soundly for the first time in days. But when she woke up, the doll was in her arms, its cold porcelain pressed against her cheek. Clara screamed, throwing the doll across the room. Her parents rushed in, finding her pale and shaking. She tried to explain, but they just laughed, assuming it was her overactive imagination. The next morning, Clara was gone. Her bed was empty, the sheets twisted as if she'd struggled. Her parents searched the house, then the yard. When they reached the oak tree, they noticed the freshly dug soil. Clara's mother knelt, digging frantically with her hands. What they found wasn't Clara. The doll lay in the dirt, pristine and perfect now, its glass eyes gleaming with life. Its once dirty dress was now spotless, vibrant pink bows adorning its hair. And as her parents stared in horror, the doll's mouth moved. "Clara's playing with me now." The wind picked up, carrying a faint giggle through the air, Clara's giggle, coming from nowhere and everywhere all at once. The waiting room. James blinked awake, his head pounding. The fluorescent lights above buzzed incessantly. He was sitting in a cold, sterile waiting room, surrounded by rows of empty chairs and peeling wallpaper. He stood and called out, "Hello? Is anyone here?" Only silence answered. No nurses, no doctors, no staff. The reception desk was deserted, papers scattered, a calendar stuck on a date decades old. As he tried the exit doors, they wouldn't budge. Panic crept in. From the shadows, a frail old woman shuffled forward. Her eyes were clouded, but she smiled sadly. "You're new," she whispered. "We've all been waiting, for so long." One by one, others emerged, some gaunt, some skeletal, all with hollow eyes fixed on the blank TV screen flickering static. "How long have you been here?" James asked, voice trembling. "Decades," a man said, his voice a dry rasp. "Years that don't pass, days that never end." They told him they were patients who had arrived for treatment but never left, trapped in the limbo of this endless waiting room. No one ever came. No one ever left. James sank into a chair, heart pounding. Hours, maybe days, passed, or was it years? Time had lost meaning. Desperate, he tried the door again. This time, it creaked open. He ran through a dim corridor lined with closed doors. One door creaked open, revealing a sterile white room with a single bed and a mirror on the far wall. He stepped inside and saw his reflection, pale, gaunt, eyes hollow. A voice echoed from behind the mirror, soft but cold. "You're finally ready." Suddenly, the mirror shattered. James screamed, but his voice was swallowed by the emptiness. He looked down to find his own hands fading, becoming translucent. He was no longer a visitor. He was the newest patient, forever waiting. Behind him, the door closed with a final, echoing click. And in the waiting room, the endless vigil continued. The delivery. The package arrived on a cold Tuesday afternoon, sitting on the doorstep with no return address. The Wilson family stared at the plain, brown box, curiosity mixing with unease. Inside was a single photograph, their house, taken from somewhere inside, dark, grainy, the front door clearly visible in the frame. No one had been home when the photo was taken. "That's impossible," Mark, the father, muttered, scanning the house. "Who could have taken this?" They locked all the doors and windows that night, double-checked the alarms, and tried to shake off the creeping sense of dread. But the next day, the box was back. This time, inside was a photo of Sarah, their teenage daughter, asleep in her bed. Her face was peaceful. Until Mark noticed the faint shadow looming behind her in the picture, something that wasn't there when he checked her room that morning. "We have to call the police," Sarah whispered, fear making her voice brittle. Before they could, the doorbell rang. Mark opened the door to find no one there. Instead, another package sat on the porch. He picked it up with shaking hands and brought it inside. This time, the photo was of Mark himself, sleeping on the living room couch, eyes wide open and staring directly at the camera. His blood ran cold. He never sleeps with his eyes open. "Who's doing this?" his wife demanded. The answer came in the next photo, delivered just before midnight. It was the Wilson family, all asleep in their beds. But in the corner of the photo, glowing faintly, was a figure, smiling. The figure wasn't in the house. It was behind the camera. A chill swept through the room. Mark's phone buzzed. A message. "I'm closer than you think. Asterisk. That night, the Wilsons heard footsteps in the hallway. But the next morning, the police found the house empty. On the doorstep was a final package. Inside, a photo of the Wilsons, all standing outside their home, smiling at the camera. Except in the photo, their eyes were black voids, empty and cold. And behind them, the shadowy figure, holding the camera, smiling wider than any human should. The last book. Marcus was desperate. Months of rejection letters had drained his hope, his fingers trembling as he scrolled through a dusty bookstore's forgotten shelf. There, wedged between worn volumes, he found a leather-bound journal embossed with gold letters, stories that must not be told. Curiosity overtook caution. He flipped it open and found empty pages, except for a single note scrawled in blood-red ink. Write. Your words will be heard. But beware, the stories bleed into reality, asterisk. With nothing left to lose, Marcus began writing. The moment his pen touched paper, ideas flooded his mind with fierce clarity. The next morning, an email awaited him, a literary agent eager to publish his work. Overnight, Marcus became a sensation. But the stories he wrote were dark, tales of murder, despair, and chaos. At first, he dismissed the coincidences. A character's death here, a violent storm there. Then came the nightmares. His latest story described a man struck by lightning in a park. 2 days later, the news reported a fatal lightning strike in that very park. Marcus's hands shook as he wrote about a house fire that trapped a family. Within hours, a nearby neighborhood burned to the ground, claiming several lives. Fear gripped him, but he couldn't stop. The journal demanded more stories, more death. One night, Marcus wrote his final entry. The writer, trapped by his own cursed pen, doomed to become a character in his own tale. Asterisk. As he sealed the journal, a chill swept the room. The walls warped, shadows lengthened. He looked up, only to see his reflection flicker, and then vanish. Outside, the air thickened, and a new headline appeared online. Local writer disappears without a trace, mysterious journal found at scene. Marcus was gone. But the journal lay open on his desk, its next blank page whispering, waiting for another story. Stories that must not be told. Asterisk. Because the last story was never meant to be finished. The Silent Town. Jack's car sputtered to a stop just outside a small town he'd never seen on any map. The sky was a bruised purple as twilight settled, and a cold wind whispered through the cracked streets. He stepped out, hoping to find gas or at least a diner. But the town was empty. Not a soul stirred. No dogs barked, no music played. The only sound was his own footsteps echoing off the shuttered windows. Then he saw them, figures standing motionless on porches and sidewalks, faces turned toward him, eyes wide but lips sealed. No one spoke. No one moved. Hello. Jack called out, his voice cracking. Only silence. Unease prickled down his spine. He walked toward the town square, where an old fountain stood dry and cracked. Suddenly, a deep rustling came from the shadows between buildings. From the darkness, a tall, twisted figure emerged. Its skin was pale and slick, its eyes black voids that swallowed the faint light. Its mouth was stitched shut, and every few seconds, the stitches twitched as if struggling to hold back a scream. Jack's breath caught. The creature moved forward, and the silence pressed down heavier, an invisible weight that crushed any urge to scream or run. The motionless townsfolk remained statues, watching but never reacting. Jack tried to speak again, but no sound came out. His voice was stolen. He stumbled back, heart pounding, as the creature reached out with elongated fingers, brushing the air near his face. Then it whispered. An impossibly soft sound that filled his mind, not his ears. Silence is our curse, and our gift. Asterisk. Suddenly, Jack understood. The townspeople hadn't lost their voices, they'd given them up. The creature was the town's sentinel, enforcing eternal silence to keep it contained. Jack tried to run, but the streets twisted impossibly, trapping him in a maze of mute faces and stitched mouths. As darkness swallowed him, he felt his own voice snap shut, stitches sewing themselves across his lips. And from the shadows, a new figure stepped forward, Jack, frozen forever in the silent town. The last sound anyone would ever hear was the softest whisper, trapped inside his mind. Speak, and you'll join us. Asterisk. The phone booth. The city park had always been ordinary, until the ancient phone booth appeared overnight, standing like a relic from a forgotten era, its glass fogged and the receiver dangling. Curious, people gathered around it, some laughing nervously, others daring each other to pick up the receiver. When Mia answered, the phone crackled, then a voice, hoarse and urgent. Don't ignore this. You have hours left. She hung up, shaken. A few hours later, a speeding car screeched past her as she crossed the street, seconds from killing her. Word spread fast. The phone booth was no joke. Everyone who answered received calls from their future selves, warnings of their inevitable deaths. But no matter what they did, the fate described always came true. Then, one night, Daniel answered. His future voice whispered calmly. Don't come here tomorrow. Ignoring the warning, he returned to the booth the next day, only to disappear without a trace. Days later, the phone booth vanished as mysteriously as it came, leaving only silence. Weeks later, Mia's phone rang. It was her own number. The voice on the line was hers, older, hollow. I warned you. Now, it's your turn. And somewhere, far away, a new phone booth flickered to life, waiting. The midnight broadcast. Ethan's voice was steady but low as he signed off his midnight radio show. The station was quiet except for the soft hum of equipment and the distant wind rattling the windows. His usual tales of ghost stories and urban legends had kept the night shift lonely but bearable. Suddenly, static burst through the speakers, cutting into the silence like a knife. A faint voice emerged, trembling and desperate. Help, trapped. Blackmoor Asylum. Ethan froze. Blackmoor had been abandoned for over 40 years after a devastating fire and a series of mysterious disappearances. No one should be inside. Who is this? Where exactly are you? Ethan asked into the microphone, hoping for a response. Please, don't come, they're watching. The line went dead. Despite his better judgment, Ethan's curiosity gnawed at him. He packed up his equipment and drove through the cold night toward the asylum, the radio's distress call looping in his mind. The rusted gates of Blackmoor groaned as he pushed them open. Inside, the air was thick with dust and decay, shadows crawling along the cracked walls. Ethan's flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating peeling paint, broken furniture, and faded signs warning visitors to keep out. His radio crackled again, faint and distant, as if the voice was coming from within the walls themselves. Ethan, don't trust them. A chill ran down his spine. He followed the sound deeper into the asylum's bowels, every step echoing through the hollow halls. Then, he saw them, silent figures standing just beyond his flashlight's reach, their faces twisted in pain and eyes hollow. They didn't move or speak, but their presence was suffocating. Suddenly, the lights flickered and a whisper echoed, "You shouldn't have come." Ethan's radio exploded with static, then a final message cracked through. "Now, you're one of us." The asylum doors slammed shut behind him, trapping him in darkness with the lost souls who had been waiting all these years, an endless broadcast with no hope of escape. The forgotten carnival. The rusty gates groaned as Lily pushed them open. The carnival grounds lay abandoned, officially shut down decades ago after a string of disappearances and strange accidents. But the flicker of lights and the faint sounds of carnival music pulled Lily and her friends deeper inside. Maybe it's just power flickering, Mark said nervously, but even he couldn't hide the unease in his voice. The carousel spun slowly, its chipped horses frozen in eerie mid-gallop. The Ferris wheel creaked, turning without a breeze. Somewhere, laughter echoed, high-pitched and unnatural. They moved through the carnival, drawn toward the main tent. The striped canvas billowed despite the still night air. Inside, clowns performed a grotesque dance. Their painted smiles stretched impossibly wide, eyes gleaming like black pits. Their movements jerked and unnatural, as if strings pulled them from above. Sarah gasped. They're not human. A performer's gaze snapped toward them, and the smile twisted into a cruel grin. Welcome, it hissed, voice scraping like rust. The friends turned to run, but the exit vanished. The tent's walls closed in, the carnival music warping into a sinister melody. Behind them, the clowns advanced, no longer performers, but puppets possessed by something ancient and hungry. Lily tripped, falling face first into the dirt. She looked up to see a clown's face mere inches away, its mouth opening impossibly wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth. Join the show, it whispered as cold hands grabbed her. The carnival had never truly closed, it had been waiting. And now, it had new stars. Shadow in the window ****. When Emily moved into her new apartment, she was eager to start fresh. The building across the street was old but charming, its windows reflecting the city lights like dark, watchful eyes. On her first night, she caught a glimpse of something, a shadow standing motionless in one of those windows. Just a silhouette, tall and still. She blinked, and it was gone. She mentioned it to her neighbor, but they laughed it off. You're just tired, they said. But each night, the shadow returned, inching closer to the glass. It never moved away, just waited. Emily started to notice odd things, her keys missing, whispers in the silence, the faint smell of smoke. One evening, she set up her phone to record the window. Hours later, she watched the footage. The figure had moved from the far corner to the center, pressing its hands against the glass, its face featureless but unmistakably watching her. Heart pounding, Emily called the building manager, who revealed the chilling truth. The building had been empty for years, evacuated after a fire that trapped a tenant inside. That night, the power flickered. Emily's bedroom window rattled. She looked up, and saw the shadow, now inside her own apartment, its black eyes boring into hers. The last thing she heard before the lights went out was a whisper. Found you.